we saw earlier. So he was a very progressive cartographer who had a very high standard of map making. He had original research and an eye for detail, and he rarely traveled outside Paris, but he followed in the tradition of other great French mappers like Sanson or Delisle. And he made highly accurate maps, and the regions which he wasn't clear about, he left them blank. As you can see in the northeast part of India is left blank. Then, of course, the famous map by the first surveyor of the East India Company, James Rennell. This is a 4-part map. And since he was promoted by Robert Clive, he came up with the first formal atlas of India, the Great Bengal Atlas, and his memoirs of a map of Hindustan capture his experience of travel in India.
So James Rennell was a young man who comes to India and he creates what we know today as Survey of India, right? So his first Great Bengal Atlas, the first atlas to be compiled with with India sources by him, was being printed in London, but the ship sank, so there is no first edition. The second edition is it was reprinted, and then the second edition comes to India. We have a copy of that Bengal Atlas. We also have a copy of the Memoirs of a Map of Hindustan.
Then, of course, we have another very interesting map, which actually it predates or precedes the building of the Suez Canal in 1869. But this is John Tallis's map called the Overland Route to India, dating to 1851. So this actually is like a depiction of the overall overland route to India. It describes the mail steam routes, the trade routes, and there is a depiction of the London post office on the top, and then the mail traveling through the desert on camels and then reaching India. The ports of Bombay and Madras are featured as well. Then we, of course, cannot escape the earliest contributors to map making. The Portuguese Portolan charts, based on which Vasco da Gama traveled to India. And it's also believed that one of the earliest Arab explorers and cartographers, geographers, Ibn Majida, accompanied him and led him to India. So the first Portolan charts, or the naval charts, is what Vasco da Gama used on his route to India.
I mean, Ibn Majida's book is available. It's a book on navigation, naval. So he was already famous at the time that he's supposed to have met Vasco da Gama and led him onto India, right? So he was from Oman, but born in Sharjah. Right. So this is a very fascinating part which Indians often miss. We've been to this point over here, which is the point from which Vasco da Gama sailed in Lisbon. And of course, this is the point where he landed. There's nothing but fishermen's nets. This is just outside Calicut. And so the Vasco da Gama journey, of course, overblown. But yeah, the Portolan charts of his time don't exist anymore. What we saw in the Lisbon Museum is this map. And this map is basically a replica of Portolan charts.
It was a closely guarded secret, the Portolan maps, so hardly any survived. Then this is a depiction on a porcelain plate which we have, which was, as part of the Jubilee year of Queen Victoria, which shows, the scan of the empire, the British Empire, where the sun never sets across 25% of the globe. Then we have examples of some marine charts. Here it's showing the Adam Bridge between India and Ceylon. Then, of course, the first scientific trigonometrical survey conducted by Lambton and then taken ahead by George Everest. And it took over 60 years. It was supposed to take 8 years. Both of them couldn't see the end of it. But it's the first scientific mapping. Then,
so I just want to touch on this was considered the greatest feat prior to man going on the moon. So the greatest human venture before man landed on the moon was the measurement of India. And John Key has a fabulous book describing it, The Great Arc. But, William Lambton lost his life. He's buried around Nagpur. George Everest died before it was completed. And the next incumbent actually names George Everest as the mountain after Everest. And there is there's a map room in the place where Everest had built a house and a cottage, which is at Dehradun. And there's a room there, a circular room called the Map Room. A very fascinating piece, which is being restored by the Survey of India, which is actually headquartered in close to it in Dehradun.
Then these are the
Yes.
famous lithographs of some famous cartographers: Linsconstein, Mercator, and Ortelius. Then we have maps on other medium apart from paper. So we found this silk scarf on which a map is printed of India and Burma for the Royal Air Force pilots, printed in 1944. So this was to be, it would never be away from their person. They would be wearing it. So if they're captured, whatever the circumstances, they would have a map to their rescue.
Basically, if you land in the jungles of Burma and you have a plane crash, and so they would tie this map when they would fly over Myanmar, today's Myanmar and Burma.
Then, of course, we have maps on other objects, tin objects. There is a tea map which shows the tea cultivation sites and the trade routes. Then
there are two of these printed in the year 1880, used for tea. We have these two. We found them in Budapest. And these two maps, these two boxes, tin boxes, have gorgeous maps. They're printed in the year 1880 for distribution of tea.
And then we have the Spanish saffron box here, which is a map of Bombay. And then this is a cigar box, which has on the left a very sensibly view of the cigar making factory in Dindigul.
This is where the first cigars were made in this factory, and they used to be sent to Churchill, who had got addicted to these.
Then, of course, a beer mug with India on it. Then hand-woven on carpets. This is a map of Afghanistan showing the recent symbols of Afghanistan. Then this map of the Mahajanpads is what we had got embroidered when we were working with Ari embroiders in Rampur. So we use the inscriptions and iconography from the coins of the Mahajanpads from our collection and images, satellite images of the rivers flowing through the Janpads to get this map hand embroidered. Then other examples of maps on fabric are the maps from Prashant Lahoti's collection. So on the left is a map of Brajbhumi, and on the right of the Jain temples on Shatrunjay in Rajasthan. They date to about 18th or 19th century.
Okay.
Ratnesh takes over.
All right. So now at this point, let's look at Elisée Reclus. He's one of the greatest geographers. He actually was branded an anarchist. He got a lot of information on, he was friends with Patrick Geddes, who was in India. And there is a whole series of letters that he exchanged. But the important thing about this lesser known work of his is 19 volumes, which he created on natural geography while he lived in Switzerland before he died. And he kept making relief maps. These are tiled maps of very fine accuracy, made between 1875 and 1894. So he not just writes these volumes, he actually makes these maps, which then they record this. Now the accuracy here is that this one here is of Gauri Shankar and the Mount Everest. So he's got global information without coming to India. He collects all geographic information of the world for 20 years and plots it. You can see Shimla, various different peaks in the Himalayas. And this is the Lonar Lake and he even estimates that this could not possibly be a volcano. So he thinks that this is a meteor lake. So this level of information, and then this book is translated into English within 3 to 4 years. So we have a copy of this book. It has fabulous 200 plus maps, which are relief maps. Very, very accurate, very far ahead of time. These maps and Reclus, his work is in a museum in Switzerland today. This was not destroyed. So this is one fortunate thing. But Reclus and his work is lesser known and very noteworthy. The next, Bharat Mata Mandir, is a relief map built similarly to Reclus's map in India. And this is in Varanasi. There is the Gupta family, which set this up in 1930. Mahatma Gandhi came and inaugurated it. But this is a very accurate map, not in great shape, but it's still there. It's a privately owned museum. The museum is actually the house which was built by Lutyens for his friend who was the collector of Varanasi. It was purchased by the Gupta family and in 1930s converted into a Bharat Mata Mandir. Now, the map, though, is highly accurate. And it has a first floor from where you can see and photograph it. You can see the crests and the troughs. They are all made to mathematical precision with information. Remember, this is 1930s, and what Reclus did was, 1880s. The concept of a map. This is again in Varanasi. There's Bharat Mata and there's Mother Sankata, Mata Sankata, and the man is praying. So yeah, there's a great book on this whole imagery of Mother India, which is associated with the freedom movement. There's a terrain map. This terrain map is there with us. It's actually made in Italy and imported to India at the government's request in around 1980. Right. So today, we can print these maps of a 3D printer at home. If you have all the accurate data, and you can download some of the accurate data with all the crests and troughs of India on through the internet. So today this is printable, but the government of India did not have this, and actually it was made in Italy and imported into India, a few copies. Now, what are the best sources? So let's quickly touch upon NATMO. If you haven't heard of what is NATMO, NATMO is the best, is the government of India, the Ministry of Sciences division. It is headquartered in Calcutta, and they make maps. So it's not just Survey of India, which comes under Ministry of Defense, and the Census of India, which comes under the Home Ministry, but the Science Ministry makes some of the best maps. And Dr. Prithvesh Nag in 2007, 2012, these are stunning, very important, very accurate historical atlas of India and cultural atlas. I'll show you a glimpse of it. Only 1,500 copies were printed. And, there are booksellers, a lot of them, foreign booksellers, who purchase the entire lot which is printed, and the government doesn't reprint them. It is so strange, but some of the best research on India comes from NATMO. 1,500 copies get printed, and it's so difficult to get a copy of these. Very cheap if you can get your hands on it, but mostly they go out of stock within a month of printing. So NATMO's cultural atlas, just two examples, the travel routes of Sant Kabir. So each map has very good 2 to 3 pages essay, giving all the literary details pertaining to the map. This is music gharanas, and there are some 80 beautifully researched maps done by NATMO in the cultural atlas. In the historical atlas, we're still very often you get a reprint of the 1930s Oxford Press historical atlas of India still going around. But this fabulous piece of research, which should nail all the issues which are coming up today when people talk of history and don't use accurate historical maps, this particular book by NATMO is noteworthy. So this is just, if you can see, 790 to 975 AD, then 10th to 11th century and 12th to 13th century, scientifically mapped and beautifully plotted. And this is from the government, right? So this is a government arm, the Ministry of Science, which does this fabulous work, but it's strangely not too much in public circulation. And it's not there online either. Then there's I think Professor Irfan Habib's Atlas, Ancient Indian History, which is basically, it's about 7 or 8 years old. The other one of Mughal Empire is out of print and has been, it's around 30 years old. But Professor Habib, who's now 90 plus, this work is mind-blowing. If you want to know anything up to the year, I think 2014 when this came out, any site, archaeological site in India, if it's, with its dating, he has plotted onto a map and provided all the details. So it's a fabulous piece which goes and covers around 2,000 sites in India, all archaeological sites up to the year 2014, fabulously mapped. So if you're looking at scientific information on Indian archaeology related plotting, that's right here. Yeah. So this is still in print. Get a copy if you don't have, but this is a fabulous piece. And it's not there digitally available. Susan Golay's book, which is India Within the Ganges, is the first, it's 1983 book, which catalogs. And for all collectors like us, it's been the Bible we've used to tick, this is the map we have, which is the year, and who's the cartographer. So this is a reference book. There are, these are manuscript maps, and this is the Mughal maps, which is reprinted from the French atlas of the Subas, which is lying in Paris. It's a reprint of the manuscript atlas. Now let's look at city maps, a very important topic, and I'll quickly run through this. Delhi, this aerial bird's eye view was reconstructed in 1858 by Illustrated London News. We have a copy of this one. And it shows it tries to show before 1857 what was Delhi like, right? So you have all the gates, Kashmiri Gate, Ajmeri Gate, all of them are there. And you can see the Boats Bridge. And this is a fabulous one, reprinted, much used. The other one, of course, from a few years prior to this is a painting, the famous painting, which is in the British Library by Mazhar Ali. And this has been reprinted a few times here in India by a few booksellers. But strangely, this has not come to light. So please observe this. There is a map by Wagner, a fairly well-known cartographer, a German cartographer who never came to India. But we even know the source book. We have the source book where there was a German who attended the 50th celebration of Aurangzeb sitting and presiding at the 50th anniversary of Shah Jahanabad. And he makes this Delhi, the Red Fort over here, with great deal of accuracy, including the boat bridge, right? And you can see the Delhi in the year 1686. The print itself is of the year 1686. Yeah. So this map has, strangely, we have a copy. Another friend of ours in Bombay, in Delhi, also has a copy, but it's rather scarce to get now. Then let's see other Delhi maps. Delhi, when it was made as a capital by Lutyens and Baker. Baker, who was a diehard Freemason, ensured that all the Masonic symbols are there. So, all the Masonic symbols are there in the Delhi map. You look at the Delhi metro map and you can see it quite clearly. And, he also made a map, which is here is a map, which is, of Delhi, which is in the Rashtrapati Bhavan on the Jaipur column. So he actually makes a map, which is like a classic Freemasons map, and leaves it behind, as a Masonic symbol on the
pillar of Rashtrapati.
Pillar there. Yeah. Now let's look at Banaras. Banaras, James Prinsip's map, which is there in this in the main museum at the BHU, the original big map. This is actually the first city in Asia which is scientifically surveyed. So in 1822, Prinsip conducts a formal survey and then plots and makes this map. It's a landmark piece in cartography because there's no city in Asia at that time which has been scientifically mapped and mapped and surveyed. So this is a proper survey map with great amount of detail. This is the original manuscript map is there at the BHU. And of course, he also made some fabulous prints. There is, of course, the Prinsep Ghat in both Calcutta and Varanasi. He, of course, famously cracked some of our ancient scripts and recognized what was written in Brahmi and Kharoshti on the Ashokan pillars.
And for the recent renovation of the waterworks in Banaras, the administrators have relied on Prinsep map because there hasn't been anything else more accurate since.
So an important map. But I also want to highlight that there's another side to Varanasi, and this is very, very important. And this is Rana P.B. Singh, who's at BHU. For the last 30 years, he's been coming out with some really mind-blowing research. So there's the Panchakroshi Yatra circuit. So there's another way to look at Varanasi in a map form, which is this, that there is, the Kashi Kshetra as a Kshetra. And, there are several trails. And these are all Yatra trails, right? So there are several trails, one which lasts about, a whole month. And you visit different sites, like this is the Surya sites, Surya sites spread across Varanasi. But there's a whole method to this, to these
the routes.
To these yatras. And there are various stops which are mandirs. So it's been very scientifically made mostly on both sides of the river. So as a Kshetra, and there are several maps that you can still get in Varanasi, which are hand-drawn, but they are Yatri maps, right? So Rana P.B. Singh's work is lying on the internet, several books also very noteworthy. He also makes this geomantic map, and it takes him several years to research, but this Panchakroshi circuit, because there is a Panchakroshi mandir, it's in private hands in one of the bylanes of Varanasi. And very difficult to take photographs there. But there's a whole code with all of these statues and what's written below it. In these 64 statues of Panchakroshi, they actually give you the Tirath Yatra which has to be done, right? So he uses this, and you can see the sky, earth, air, water, fire, and it all links back to the Gyan Vapi well. So there is a well inside the Kashi Vishwanath Mandir. Of course, the original Kashi Vishwanath Mandir is not there, but the well exists. So this knowledge well, which connects you with your heart, blood, legs, head to the cosmos. The connection between man and cosmos is actually has been plotted here, and the Panchakroshi circuit is basically a way to achieve that. Right. So this is a fabulous piece of research. It's well researched. There's several books on the topic, but very noteworthy because this connects the mandir and the mandala. So here Kashi becomes a mandala, right? And the man, or the human body and its connection with the cosmos, is visible through this. This is something which the world's greatest. We spoke about Patrick Geddes earlier, a friend of Ellis Reclus, the man who coined urban planning as a term. He was in India, and look at his statement. He didn't actually survey Varanasi, although he surveyed 50 other towns in India. That India, and particularly South India, was, and this up to a not so remote past, one of the greatest city-making regions of the world, is ever being more plainly re-established by the investigators of books and of buildings alike. In Indian cities have mostly grown around temples. The mutual attraction of temples to natural surroundings and of cities to temples have been the chief factors in the growth and development of city life in India. This is, of course, from Mount Arunachalam and Ramana Maharshi's place. This is that town.
Trichy.
No, not Trichy. Yeah. So, okay. Over to the concept. The concept, of course, the man's connection with the cosmos. We've already explained the Mandir, Mandala. A lot of cities in India actually run on this concept. So we'll quickly run you through some of these. Varanasi, just for your information, the Varanasi Kashi Vishwanath temple has a replica from 7th century intact at Mahakuta in Karnataka. You can actually see the entire, Shiva story carved in 7th century around it. If we have a template of what was the Kashi Vishwanath temple originally like, this is it. Then there is a town which is from the 17th century called Chota Kashi, barely 1 hour's drive out of Delhi, and that the town is known as Anup Shahr. It is on the main Ganga, and you can actually, when you take a photograph of Anup Shahr with its temples on one side, you can see why it's called Chota Kashi, right? So again, there is a continuity here. Similarly, it's not the only one, Kashi Vishwanath apart. There's Kesaria Stupa in Champaran, and that has been replicated as the Borobudur Stupa in Java. There's a great deal of parallel between the two. And Kesaria Stupa is very important because it's the site where the Buddha actually, he has food poisoning, right? So this stupa was constructed, was forgotten for many years, and had a lot of trees growing on top. In recent years, it's been dug up, and it was taller than the Borobudur one. And after a few earthquakes, the top has gone off. But there is a great deal of parallel worth exploring. This is in Champaran. We've been to both the sites, and the parallel is obvious. Borobudur, many connections. Indonesia has many connections, and of course, why Java is called Java. This is in the words of President Sukarno of Indonesia, who actually relates his name, the name of the city Probolinggo, the name of Indonesia, which he says is India, and Nesi, which means islands in Latin. So Indian islands. So the connection between Yogyakarta and so between India and Indonesia, there are many parallels. Now let's look at a map which is made in 1908 by Pajita, who actually plots the Pandava side and the Kaurava sides in blue and red on a map. Okay, so he actually puts the Panchalas in blue and the Kauravas in red. And whoever, so this has been plotted. It's a very interesting map. This is one way to do it literally. Strangely, it's only later Gita Press, etc., have carried the same model and made these in Hindi also. But in India, we've never seen this topographical view until Pajitas. There is no known copy before this. How did we view the Pandavas, Kauravas, and the Mahabharatas? So if you see the Mahabharata-related towns, so close to Hastinapur, chapter 1 of Mahabharata, as you know, is Parikshit, right? So there is a town called Parikshitgarh, which is barely, as you can see, this is from, if you're going from Meerut, Hastinapur is 12 kilometers and Parikshitgarh is 7 kilometers. So this is around the city of Meerut and not far from the original Ganga, right? The Hastinapur was on the original Ganga till the Ganga canal came And so now today Hastinapur is close to the Ganga canal, and the original Ganga has moved some 30 kilometers away. But the place has a place called Parikshitgarh. Now you go to the Dieng Plateau in central Java, and there are these Pandava temples, and close to it is Desa Parikshit, a small little village that we chanced upon. And this is the same name, Parikshit. Why? Because these are Pandava temples.
Drona temple, Bhim temple, such are the names.
Yeah, and inside, of course, it's Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. The names of the temples are Arjuna temple, Bhima temple, right? And there are also caves here from 7th, 8th century, and this is, I think, around 10th or 11th century, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So these temples exist, and this Mahabharata Valley is there in central Java, and we have the Mahabharata-related towns, including Hastinapur and Ahichatra, not far from there, in Uttar Pradesh, not far from Delhi. Right. Now let's look at Ahichatra, which has been so many times mentioned in mapping, right? So from Ptolemy, he plots it as the largest city of India. Now, according to archaeological records, Ahichatra was from around 700 BC till Harshvardhan's time, physically the largest city of India. The National Museum in Delhi is packed with terracotta from there. And this is just a 3.5-hour drive from Delhi. And, there are 3 large structures. One of them here is one stupa-like structure with a shivling on top. Then there is a Buddhist kind of a large structure of the same size. The walls of the city are there. And this is the map which was made by Alexander Cunningham, who found the city, or rather didn't find the city, but he rediscovered it using these sources of Hyun Sang, right? So this Panchala place is very important. Even 4 out of the 10 principal Upanishads, the writer says that they are sitting in Panchal Raj's capital and writing them. The Bhavabhuti, this Kama Sutra, seems to be just a summary of a book which was written in Panchal Raj, but it's not available anymore. Right, so this town is very important till 3rd century AD, when Samudragupta comes from Allahabad and defeats the Panchalas. And the river also has moved, so the people from this town move 40 kilometers away to a town which is what is the town called? Badaयूं. So this place is actually a gorgeous archaeological site which has strangely been preserved because people are not sitting on top. It's again. Now, we were guided by this on our GPS using those old maps that we had because we were curious about Adishatra and Ahichatra. Ahichatra today is, with the same name, a village in India. Out of 6 lakh villages, we have a place called Ahichatra, but between 800 BC and 700 AD, it was India's largest city. Okay, mentioned as the large city in Mahabharata, as a Mahajanpad and the largest of the Janpads, and Buddha came and gave a talk here, perhaps. We can even see the well, perhaps, where he gave the talk. But strangely, we've forgotten this town. Okay, let's move to Ramayana. So you have Ayodhya from 14th century. Ayodhya, we've been to this place in Thailand. The old capital before Bangkok, on the same river on which Bangkok's Chao Phraya is Ayodhya. It's almost like an island today, but it protrudes out onto the Chao Phraya. And if you go to Saryu River and the Ayodhya in India, forget all the messy part where the new modern temples are coming up. If you go to the riverfront, it's just stunning. If you go in the monsoon, it's large as the Thai river. Did the 2 people talk? Did they have? Was there a connection? Is it protruding out onto the riverfront a common chord? Not just the name, perhaps worth seeing further. There are Ramayana sites in Sri Lanka. We've traveled to these, longer discussion. But again, all Shiva temples, including this place where Sita meets Hanuman. But at Ashok Vatika, again, the archaeological evidence is much later. There is nothing which predates something like 4th, 5th century. But all the Shiva temples are very much there, which are mostly 800 to 1,000 years, 1,500 years old. In Myanmar, the 2 oldest towns and the most important towns in terms of Burmese civilization are Pew and Baek Thano. Both are Vishnu towns. This is just before Buddhism comes in a big way into Myanmar. Yeah. Both are Vishnu towns, and there's a lot of great terracotta and lots. And the town Pew was also one of the names was Sri Kshetra, and Sri Kshetra is of course the old name of Jagannath Puri. also a Vishnu town, as you know, right? And Bektano is just a way of saying Vaikuntha. Okay, it's just a Vaikuntha becomes Bektano in Mon language. So both these places are today archaeological sites with all the Vishnu iconography nicely curated. We had the chance to see these. And the common thing here is that there's a Shankha Kshetra or Shri Kshetra, which protrudes out into a water body open on one side. This is one thing that we caught at Jagannath Puri. This kind of a Shankha Kshetra. There is a map of the Tirtha where the whole place is like a Shank of Vishnu touching the ocean. Similar, setup of Pew and Bektano too. Did this knowledge transfer from one place to another? Very probably it did. Yeah. Sri Krishna towns within India, so it's not just outside India. You know that Madurai, which is Madura and Mathura, have a connection. What is that connection? So we definitely know there's a Sri Krishna connection, and the name Mathura and Madura have a connection. But the rest of it, in terms of when did the knowledge transfer, is it in the mandir or the mandala of the area? Again, worth exploring. Amritsar Golden Temple has a map. If you see, the temple is created for a book, right? The Guru Granth Sahib. The Guru Granth Sahib has 33 chapters and 31 chapters, and they're all named after musical ragas. And they are to be sung when the sun comes at one particular point and comes and shines on the Golden Temple, and then it goes around. It forms an arc, and when the sun sets on the other side. Now, as the sun comes up and it sets on one side of the Golden Temple, you can see these tiles. They're geometric tiles. In the oldest one, you can actually see again they were always on one side, not on the other, where the sun shines. Are there 31 of them on top of the terrace also of the old Golden Temple? If you are allowed to go to the terrace, you can again see some geometric patterns. Now, this is again something where the temples, as you know, was destroyed twice and rebuilt. So there is some bit of give some slack for it, but there seems to be the sacred geometry piece shows up. And there's very little doubt that this was made, with all the ancient knowledge was built, came into making the Golden Temple.
Sangeeta and Ratnesh, I just wanted to inform you that it's nearing 7:30.
All right. So we're going to, we'll 10 minutes and we should be done. Then we take questions. So Angkor Wat is again a Sri Yantra. It's that same mandala, and literally Angkor is the Cambodian way of saying Nagara. So it's the Sanskrit word Nagara, which means town, and Wat is just the literal way of saying temple. So temple town. Now that perfect structure, if you see this is from a drone, you can see it is geometrically precise. It's built on the Sri Yantra, right, and the lotus. The lotus, the Sri Yantra, and then the Mount Meru, and that same cosmology piece comes up. You go to Ujjain, and the main Shakti Peeth, both on the floor in the inner sanctum and on the ceiling, you can see the Sri Yantra quite literally. It gets painted every few years. So you see the lotus, you see all the 52 petals, you see the Devis associated with the petals, and an alphabet, Karka Garga. Now this is where the astrology component comes in, because there is a mathematics associated with Karka Garga Yara Lavasha. That was the original mathematics. And that every astrologer, whether Hindu astrologer, Jain astrologer, or Buddhist astrologer we met, even in Myanmar, every astrologer we met knows this. So this type of this mathematics, which is linked to the Karka Garga Yara Lavasha, has not been forgotten. It is the fundamental piece which you have to learn before you understand astrology. And the astrology and astronomy connection in India is not lost. That is what most of the sacred geometry represents. So the phonetics here, which are associated with the Devi and with a type of mathematics, with numbers. Let's not call it mathematics, but just numbers, right? So this is something which comes up. For more on maps, we're towards the end. There is a great deal of map information if you're interested in learning digitally. Please look up the University of Michigan. There's a Maps of India exhibition permanently open. It took place some 8-10 years back. Fabulous collection of their own Michigan University maps with great information and curated beautifully. Then there is the best of the historical maps of India, of course, is the Schwarzberg Atlas. It is online, given by Chicago University, out of print. But this is a 25-year, Chicago University project, which created beautiful scientific maps. Of course, NatMo's has done a great job independently. And I think that NatMo Atlas and the Schwarzberg is an update on the Schwarzberg Atlas. Then University of Chicago has its maps online. There's Kalakriti. So Prashant Lahoti has a fabulous collection of maps. One of the best collections of maps in India is with Prashant Lahoti, who's in Hyderabad. He did so here in National Museum in Delhi, and I think the museum, the exhibition went to Bombay too about 5 years back, 4 to 5 years back. But he's done a great job by digitally archiving and then putting it all for free on the Google Museum. So Prashant Lahoti's collection is entirely available. He has some rare manuscript maps of India. One of the best collection of manuscript maps, apart from the standards which we showed you. So he has most of the standards, very noteworthy. Then there is a old maps project going on. You can all contribute to it. There are old maps and they're getting linked. No university from India is participating, but anyone is free to. Of course, one of our favorite projects is the World Mapper project. So this is, again, the worldmapper.org, passed by India, but I think later many have joined it. This is a project very, very noteworthy where statistical information is put through visually. If you haven't seen World Mapper, you're too stuck to Facebook and LinkedIn. Please see World Mapper if you have any interest in maps. This is just stunning. It's the modern way of using maps. Then David Rumsey has several, 500,000 maps which he's digitized and put at least 40,000 of India, antiquated maps. Not great research, but you can Google search and see for yourself and blow them up large. Great. So these are good links to see online. We are going to conclude now. Just to say, what is a map? We had started with this. So a naksha is one word we use, and manchitra, they mean different, right? An impression, a mark, and we say nakshebazi also. But manchitra from Sanskrit is a measured picture, quite literally.
And then, just because printmaking and map making went hand in hand, they each supported each other. So here we have some prints of printmaking, and 250 years later, another view of printmaking. Then just some pointers as a map collector. So the cartographer, it is derived from the Latin word composuit or delineate. So this actually points to the function of a cartographer, engraver. These are the main pointers in deciding which map to buy, in enhancing its value and valuing it. The printer,
lots of fakes are there. So these terms are something that you should read up on. So this gives you the direction, oriens, meridio. So these are all Latin terminologies, old European terminologies. If you're getting into buying antiquarian maps, please look up these terms because there's a lot of fakes going around. I mean, we've also bought fakes, right. Expensive fakes. It's an expensive hobby.
Right. Then, of course, some other useful terms in printing are proof, which is the print taking before the engraving is complete, the first sample. Then the impression, which is a single print. So impression show differences in the engraving on the plate as seen by different states. Then the edition, which is the impression from one state of a plate. Then reissue any other later edition after the first edition.
So this drives the value of the same map, right?
Right.
So what we haven't showed you is do we have a reissue, do we have an edition, or do we have a proof, or do we have the first single print, right? So this is something that we haven't clarified to you because of the time. But these are things that one has to go into if you're collecting antiquarian maps.
Then, of course, is the material used and the process in map making. So the early manuscript maps were made on parchment paper or vellum. Then came handmade thick paper from France. So there was thick paper from France or Germany, and fine handmade paper came from Northern Italy. And English maps were on French paper. Then, of course, watermark, size of paper, specifications are there. Then, of course, the printing process. Then you have relief process or intaglio and surface process, lithography. And so the earlier maps were on woodcuts. Then came etchings and engravings. Then, so what are the things which beautify maps as well? Are cartouches, which are legends or emblems, which also have compass roses, the rose, the certain other main features of that area, like we saw sea monsters in Moonster's map. Then terrain maps, as we saw earlier, or which is the category who commissioned them, East India Company or Mughal maps. Then later, as during the British period, certain other new icons came up, which were important features for the surveyors. Say, where is a dark bungalow? Where is a salt factory? A chowki? Where is a Hindu temple? Where is the, say, the black town or the white town?
So yeah, so these are so specific to India. There is a set of iconography which comes into European cartography too. That's the point here. But let's get back to the Indian cartography. And there are certain, again, the world as lotus mandala is something we've shown you on Angkor Wat and the Sri Yantra. So this is one thing which is a consistent theme. The lotus and its leaves represent, the different dvipas. And at different points, the Mahajanpads. So again, this is the world as lotus mandala as a common theme. The Sri Yantra is the other one. Now, the other piece which is very important to understand is what is the relevance of 108. This is, again, a basic tenet of Indian astrology and astronomy. And that connection is known to all of us, and yet we don't know. So what is it? Now, if you see whether it's Buddhists, Jains, if somebody has beats, you have 108 beats. How many times should you be going around, doing parikrama? 108 times, right? Why 108? So the 108 is actually explained in this whole Mandir, mandala as a concept, is basically your connection, because it's like the GIS GPS location. Earth, when it's created after the Big Bang, it rests at a point. It's continuously moving, and yet it rests at a point where the distance between Earth and the Sun divided by the circumference of the Sun is 108, and distance between Moon and Earth divided by the circumference of the Moon is also approximately 108. You can try this out yourself, but this specific positioning to Earth's Moon and Earth's Sun vis-a-vis the circumference of the Sun and the Moon is what is the figure of 108. Okay, so this is again an interesting figure to note. It is a basic tenet in astrology.
Dinesh, I'm sorry to butt in again. It's 7:35.
Yeah. So we are on the last two slides. Literally, there's the turtles, of course, all the way down represent infinity. So, this whole concept is there. So there is a personalized map. And actually, the personalized map is your Janampatri. If you see, there's a lot of astrology on it and a lot of signs, of course. If you just you stop using it for looking into the future, but just look at it as a piece connecting you with your location. It's an interesting document, right? So what is a map? So let's connecting images, words, and numbers. So look at the Hindi. We said Manchitra. So Chitra is pictures, Shabda is words, Ganit is numbers, and Manchitra is map. Images, content, data, and maps as strategy. Photos, languages, mathematics contribute to strategy. Visuals, content, analytics, and design, a continuity. So when you connect visuals, content, analytics, and design, it's the germination of a new thought, the DNA of thought. Think about it. And there is a fifth factor, which is intent, right? So if you look at what is your purpose of the map, and the intent is actually famously explained by Viktor Frankl, who takes these four different shapes and takes his torch. Depending on where you shine the torch from on the same objects, either you get circular shadows or you get the same shadow as the object itself, right? So apart from these four elements, the purpose and the intent is, so we use this piece. I mean, what you use the map for, eventually a lot depends on what the purpose is. Google Maps, if you haven't seen this movie, see, it is image search based, not word search and not point-to-point travel. A boy who gets lost, if you haven't seen this Oscar-winning film, Lion, there's an actual case of a boy from India in Maharashtra who gets lost on a train at the age of 3, is adopted by 2 Australians. As a teenager, he tries to find out, use Google Maps, and he has a memory of a railway line and a water tank next to it. So he looks at every town, every place across India through Google Maps for many years, and finally spots a place which he thinks is and it actually is the place, and he reconnects with his original family. Right. So that's one way to use the map. Of course, another way is this. Yeah,
I agree.
A word search. I wish I had a Google map of the inside of my purse. Of course, there are commercial interests of both Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant. Google Assistant being far superior in terms of its word search capability, its sound search capability. But yeah, I mean, I think we're going too much into point to point. So that's basically what we had. Over to you, back and any questions. Sorry, we've stretched a little longer than we had planned.
But it was fascinating, as is evidence in the compliments which have come in about the depth of your research and the well thought of presentation. That's the last one.